What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my recap, reaction, and review of the 5th episode of the Paramount Plus drama series, Landman. And I want to apologize for the lateness of this video. Guys, it's been a hell of a last 10 days or so. I'm working on my own independent film project and kind of trying to get some of the administrative and creative things off the ground. So that's why this video is so late. I do apologize. I'm trying to kind of catch back up. So if you guys could bear with me, I'd greatly appreciate it. But just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers. So if you haven't gotten around to watching this episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So, as we sit here in what I like to call the doldrums of the season, that being the middle third of the season, I noticed that last episode got a bit clumsy. Mostly, I think, for the sake of expediency, which I'm not sure is a good thing or a bad thing just yet. We'll have to wait and see how things shake out. But episode 4 was my lowest rated episode yet, and given how that episode went, I wonder if things might get a little worse before they get better from a narrative standpoint. That said, I'm still very much looking forward to seeing what becomes of Tommy and Angela, as well as Cooper and Ariana. And of course, I'm wanting to see things begin to get hectic between Tommy and Monty, which is what I still hope for at this point in the season. Now, episode 5, entitled Where is Home, starts with Tommy, Dale, and Boss out at one of the rigs inspecting it. Now, Dale explains, that it's about the same as the rig they just got done working over, that they should actually work the whole field over, that the rigs are all 35 years or more in production. Now, Tommy asks Boss how many rigs there are in the field in total, and Boss explains that there are 17. At that point, Tommy gets a call from Angela complaining that Tommy spent the night before banging her on all fours, but is now refusing her calls. Tommy explains to Angela that he's working. He shows Angela the guys in FaceTime, and they both say hello as Tommy explains that the early bird gets the worm. Angela replies, "I know what he could have gotten," and flashes the camera. But the guys see it instead of Tommy, and he explains to her that the guys just saw her naked, but she doesn't care, and she's asking when he'll be home. Now, Tommy explains that he doesn't know, that he'll probably be late, that they're checking wells. Angela asks if he'll be home in time for supper. Tommy explains that he doesn't know. Angela remarks that he'd better be because Cooper is coming, that it's family dinner night. Tommy asks, "Since when?" Angela replies, "Since I thought of it when I woke up this morning. Let's say 7. Tommy explains to Angela that he has to drive a 300-mile loop. Angela sits up in bed, frustrated, and asks Tommy if he can apply a little effort into repairing the damage that has been done to their family. Tommy replies, "What damage are you talking about? All I said is I'm working and I'll get there when I can." Angela then replies, "Picking up right where we effing left off, huh?" Tommy replies, "Exactly, picking up where we left off, which is what I effing told you." Angela remarks that Tommy is grumpy before insisting that she'll see him at 7 before telling him that she loves him. Tommy responds in kind before Angela informs him that she plans to do a little more shopping, that the oil house looks like a frat house, but that she still has Victor's credit card, and then she says goodbye. Now, Tommy hangs up and Dale asks if the pair plan to give it another try. Tommy explains that it's pretty hard to say no to her when she's not dressed. Dale asks Tommy if Angela is aware that he and Nate are going to be at dinner because they live in the house. Tommy remarks that Angela isn't thinking that deep inside it. Boss then asks if he can come to dinner, claiming that he doesn't want to eat, he just wants to sit in the corner and watch Angela. Tommy chuckles, replying, "Why not? We can use all the witnesses we can get." Tommy then makes a call to Monty, who is in the kitchen with his wife. And he answers, and Tommy explains that the Andrews wells are underperforming, that they're about the same age as the other well, and about the same production, asking if he wants to keep the workover crew going or not. Monty asks how many wells. Tommy explains there are 17. Monty explains that he doesn't like pressing his luck. Tommy explains that they're all pulling from the same field, so there's no risk, only expense. He goes on to explain that the rigs are old and need to be serviced. Monty tells him to work over the wells one at a time and that he wants to see production reports before he starts the next one. And Tommy replies, yes, sir. Now, Tommy hangs up and tells the guys that getting money from a billionaire is like pulling teeth. Dale explains that's how he became a billionaire. Tommy explains that Monty became a billionaire by betting everything on black and hitting. Boss explains that's how you stay a billionaire, that once you get the house's money, you start pinching every penny. Dale explains that he needs to find some of that house money. Tommy tells him that what he needs to do is quit getting divorced. Now, Boss interjects and explains that what they both need to do is stop getting effing married. That if there were ever two people that should be single, it's the two of them. Tommy replies to Boss, you forget I know your wife. You run from her like a scalded dog, so don't give me that shit. Boss replies, maybe so, but she don't call me at 8 o'clock in the morning buck ass naked for all my friends to see and then chew my ass out before telling me she's going shopping with another man's credit card. Tommy replies, you say that like it's a bad thing, before all three men get in their separate company vehicles and head off. Roll opening credits. Now, from there we see Cooper show up at Ariana's house. He exits the truck and approaches her front door, ringing the doorbell. She answers, thanking him for coming, and invites him in. Cooper shows Ariana how dirty he is, but she claims to be used to it and tells him that he can take his shoes off inside, so Cooper enters the house. Now, once inside, Ariana shows Cooper all of her bills, explaining that when someone dies, there are tears and meals and a funeral, and then there's the business of death. She explains that none of that makes sense to her. Cooper sits down at the table with her and starts to go over the bills. He explains that with what she has in the bank, she should be able to cover bills for about 6 months. Ariana laments having to sell the house. Cooper explains that in that case, she would just be exchanging mortgage for rent. He then tells her that he would sell the truck, that it's paid for, and that will bring down her expenses. Now, at that point, the baby starts crying, and Ariana goes to check on it. She comes back with it in her arms, and Cooper is again uncomfortable watching her breastfeed. He goes out into the backyard and notices that her yard needs mowing, and he asks her if she has a lawnmower. Now, from there, we see Monty landing on top of a building via helicopter. He gets out and is escorted inside by a woman. And next we see him inside sitting at a table in a conference room with a bunch of other men and women discussing the state of the oil and gas industry. Now, a man named Bob expresses that their concern isn't combust engine regulation, that 60% of American electricity still comes from fossil fuel, that almost 40% comes from natural gas alone, and that number is climbing. He goes on to state that nuclear is maxed out unless they build more reactors, and that he doesn't think that will happen because nuclear isn't an option for climate change activists, even though it's the cleanest and most reliable form of energy. He continues that speech and telling people that wind is twice as expensive as natural gas and that solar is 4 times the cost, and that on its best day, a solar power plant generates electricity for about 8 hours. That all their electric vehicles are doing is exporting their emissions to the power plant. He then tells the group that their greatest potential for growth is in exports. He explains to the group that China only consumes 14% of the world's petroleum reserves, and that India only uses 4.9%, with Russia using a little over 3%. He then tells the group that he feels that their lobbyists should focus on easing the regulations on exports. Now, at that point, a British man named Steve Ratcliffe interrupts and explains that what they aren't seeing in the States is the rabid opposition to fossil fuels of any kind. Bob tells him that 38% of the UK's electricity came from natural gas piped in from Norway. At that point, Monty interrupts and reminds the group that they are well diggers and that they don't, nor can they ever control how their product is used or what it's used for. Monty goes on to explain that there's nothing he can do to make an engine run cleaner because he doesn't build engines. He explains that he doesn't care what the governor of California says about electric vehicles, that he doesn't care how many career college students block London traffic or spray paint a sculpture. He cares that the price of oil stays between $76 and $88 a barrel. He tells the group that that is what they should be discussing. He goes on to explain that the world has already convinced itself that they are evil for providing them with the one thing they interact with every day and that they will not be convinced otherwise. He then tells the group to stop wasting their time and to stop wasting his. Now, after Monty's speech, Bob tells him that he'd better start caring because his children might inherit an oil fortune, but his grandchildren won't. He goes on to explain that what they inherit is going to have to start being built now. He tells Monty that the party's not ending tomorrow, but that the party is ending. Now, keep that in mind. Now, from there we go back to Ariana's house, and we see Cooper mowing the backyard as Ariana's dog looks on. Big dog too, right? Once he's done, he packs the debris in garbage bags and he takes a drink from the nearby hose. Now the dog approaches and Cooper asks aloud if he's smiling or fixing to bite him. He reaches out to let the dog touch the dog, but it begins barking loudly and Cooper pulls his hand back. Now Ariana watches from inside as Cooper makes another attempt to bond with the dog. He sits down next to it on the back patio area and tries again to touch it. But again, the dog barks loudly, causing Cooper to retreat. Now at that point, Ariana walks outside with 2 beers and orders the dog inside. She offers Cooper one of the beers and he sits down next to her, or she sits down next to him, and she takes a drink of the other. Cooper remarks that he didn't know she could drink while breastfeeding. She explains that more than one is no good, but that one helps her body produce more milk. Cooper again looks flustered as Ariana notices, asking him why it makes him so uncomfortable to talk about the body and watching the body do what it's supposed to. Cooper explains to Ariana that it's just that he's younger than her. She remarks that he doesn't look younger than her. Cooper explains that working as a roughneck is his first job, that none of his friends are married, and that her baby is the first baby he's ever been around, and that she's the first person he's ever seen feed one. He goes on to explain to Ariana that her husband is the first person he knew who died, and that he thought he was a man. Now, Ariana thinks before stating that she asked her grandmother once how she felt in her soul, that she was 80, but she always wondered if she felt 80, and that her grandmother told her that in her heart she would always be 17, that she told her that the trick to life is to endure all the loss and pain of this place, but to stay 17 in your heart. Ariana wonders aloud if she can do it. She then tells Cooper that the yard looks nice and thanks him. Cooper then gets up and tells Ariana that he's going to get started on the front yard. Ariana tells him that she doesn't care about the front yard, that it's for the neighbors to look at, but that the backyard is for her. Cooper then explains that he's going to mow it anyway. And Ariana asks, why mow it when I tell you I don't want it? And Cooper replies, I don't know how else to help. The Cooper-Ariana scenes were really, really clumsy, and I'll get to why a little later in the video. But from there, we see Cooper in the front yard getting his mow on. And lo and behold, my man Manuel pulls up to the house and damn near hits him. Then he gets out, gun in hand, and approaches Cooper asking, what the F did I tell you, huh? I told you to stay the F away. Now you're here playing husband? Huh, mother effer? He points the gun at Cooper, and Cooper stops the mower and puts his hands up. Now Ariana sees this and rushes out of the house, telling Manuel to stop it. She stands between the two of them, and Manuel asks, what is this? You know, LVO is barely in the ground, and this pecker was mowing the effing lawn. Ariana explains that yes, Cooper is mowing the front lawn after he mowed the back lawn and weeded the garden, and helped her organize LVO's bills and build a budget. She then asks Manuel, how many times have you come by to help? Where are all his effing friends? Because you don't care if I lose the house or my baby stars. You just care if I F another man, huh? That's where you draw the line with my life. She shoves Manuel before asking, who do you think you are? And at that point, we hear the baby inside crying. Ariana explains to Manuel that the baby needs changing. She asks, are you going to do it? And then she looks at Cooper and says, I bet he would. Manuel explains to Ariana that Cooper would change the baby because he wants to have sex with her, basically. And Ariana replies, he never mentioned that. Manuel again insists that that's what Cooper wants. Ariana tells him to watch closely as she approaches Cooper and just flat out kisses him on the mouth to Manuel's extreme displeasure. Ariana then explains to Manuel that if Cooper plays his card right, he just might get the chance to F her before remarking, some effing friend you are. Get off my lawn before I call the police. Now. And then she walks back inside to tend to her baby. Now at that point, Cooper explains to Manuel that that's the second time he's pointed a gun at him, and that the third time is going to be his last. And Manuel walks up close to him and replies, you goddamn right it is. I'll see you tomorrow, mother effer. Before he gets in his car and speeds away as Cooper stands there looking on. Now, next we see Rebecca arriving at the oil house to see Nathan. She gets out of the car and she rings the bell, and as Nathan answers the door, Rebecca remarks that it feels inappropriate to be meeting Nathan at his residence. Nathan explains that it's also his office. Rebecca replies, M-Tex doesn't have an office in town. Nathan explains that they have remote offices that move with the rigs and a satellite offices at the man camps, promising that she would find those offices much more inappropriate. He offers Rebecca a cup of coffee, but she refuses, sitting down on the couch next to him. Nathan explains that the three widows have 8 dependents, the youngest 3 months old, and that he was thinking of offering $250,000 per household plus a college fund, that he feels like that addresses both the short-term and long-term needs of the families. Rebecca asks if he's including the cash values of their 401ks in the settlement number. Nathan explains that he is not. Rebecca's a shark, boy. She gives 0 fucks, bro, like seriously. Rebecca reminds Nathan that in the case of Louise, that would make his offer more like $600,000. Nathan explains to Rebecca that the families are entitled to the value of the 401ks regardless of the settlement. Rebecca explains that they don't know that. Nathan explains that their attorney will. And Rebecca asks if they have attorneys. Nathan says that they don't to his knowledge, and Rebecca explains that they should make the deal before they get them. Boy, listen, Rebecca, she just don't care. No heart. Nathan tells Rebecca that he wants to check with the insurance company, but Rebecca stops him. She explains that the insurance company isn't going to offer them anything, that they're going to investigate for a year, claim it was negligence on the part of the employees, and wash their hands of it, which I totally believe they would do. She goes on to explain that there's no cap for economic or punitive damages for wrongful death in Texas, and that the lawsuit is worth $40 or $50 million per incident. She tells Nathan that they are not going to let it get that far, that if the families don't bite at $250K, then she'll offer them $300, and that if they don't bite there, $400, and if they still don't bite, she'll scare the shit out of them for an hour, and then they'll offer $500. She explains that they're leaving each house with a check on the table and a signature on the settlement. Now, at that point, Ainsley walks in wearing a bikini because that's pretty much all she's had on the whole season to this point. Anyway, Rebecca asks if she's still spring breaking, and she, of course, says she is. Then Ainsley asks Rebecca if they're working, and Rebecca says that they are. Ainsley then asks if she has a swimsuit, and Rebecca replies, "No, not on me." Ainsley tells her that she can borrow one of hers, but Rebecca explains that she's got a lot of work to do back at the hotel. Ainsley then asks if they want some popcorn, and Rebecca again declines. She then turns to Nathan and asks him, explaining that it's only 30 calories a cup. Nathan also declines, and Ainsley goes skipping off into the kitchen. Now, at that point, Rebecca explains to Nathan that having Ainsley at the oil house, that the sexual harassment lawsuit is literally writing itself. Nathan explains that he has already made that point to Tommy, and Rebecca explains that she will make it clearer. Nathan explains that nothing would please him more. Poor Ainsley just ain't got nothing to do, right? At that moment, Nathan and Rebecca hear the sound of a truck backing into the driveway, and Nathan gets up to see what it is. He opens the front door to find a furniture truck with a delivery for Norris. The mover asks if he can look around the house to make a game plan, and Ainsley comes out with her bag of popcorn and tells the guys to come on in. Nathan looks at Ainsley, and she explains that her mother put everything on Victor's credit card as the pair enter the house behind the movers. Nathan explains that he doesn't know of Victor, and Ainsley explains to Nathan that Victor is now her ex-stepfather. Or is he? Rebecca then explains to Nathan that the lawsuit has now expanded its scope into fraud or larceny, depending on how a prosecutor would choose to approach it. She grabs her things and explains that someone should have plausible deniability over what's happening and that they should present to the families in the morning. Nathan explains that he'll set it up before Rebecca exits the house. And at that point, Angela enters and explains to the movers that she wants them to move out all the old furniture before they move all the new furniture in, and that she'll be upstairs if they need anything. She then notices Nathan and says hello, again calling him Ned. He corrects her, but she ignores him and heads back upstairs. And as the movers begin to move all the old furniture out of the house, Nathan instructs them not to touch any of the files. Now outside the house in the backyard, Ainsley is laying out, still in her bikini, tanning, when a young woman next door named Shelby calls out to her claiming that Something in the Orange by Zach Bryan, the song that Ainsley is currently listening to, is her favorite, before introducing herself. Now Ainsley does the same before Shelby explains that she's heard all about her. Ainsley asks how, and Shelby explains that all the boys at the country club had spent the week drooling over her. At that point, Ainsley gets up and meets Shelby over at the fence between the two properties, and explaining that her mother wore out their welcome at the country club, and Shelby explains that she heard that too. Now Ainsley goes on to explain that she's on spring break, and Shelby wonders why she's spending it in Midland. And Ainsley tells her that they were supposed to go to Tulum, but that a bunch of tourists got killed and her parents had freaked out and canceled the whole trip. Shelby then tells Ainsley that there's a patch party tomorrow night, asking if she wants to go. Ainsley asks what a patch party is, and Shelby explains that they go out to the oil wells with kegs, that they circle up the cars, and they blow off steam. Ainsley remarks that it sounds like fun and that she'd love to go. She asks Shelby what time the party starts, and Shelby explains that it starts around 9 or so. Ainsley explains that, again, that she'd love to go, and Shelby tells her that she'll come over and grab her. Ainsley thanks her, and the pair says their goodbyes. So finally, Ainsley's made a friend. Thank God, because, yeah, she was getting on my nerves. Charming though she is, the fact that she doesn't have anything to do was kind of getting on my nerves, is what I should say. Now, from there, we go out to one of the oil wells, and we see Tommy, Dale, and Boss examining it. And Dale explains that the well just started dropping off in the last month or so. He asks which crew maintains the field that they're in, and Tommy explains that Luis's crew did, and that they haven't been reassigned yet. He then turns to Boss and asks if they'd like to add a little to his plate. Boss explains that the field is a ways away from his typical turf, asking if Conoco, another oil company, can take it on. Tommy explains that the field isn't part of their co-op with Conoco, and that, and at that point, trucks arrive on site. Now, Boss thinks it's a crew, but Tommy tells him that it isn't. He asks Boss if he has anything on him, as in that pow, and he says that he does. Tommy then tells Dale to record everything on his phone, but not to get caught doing it just as the vehicles pull to a stop. And we see cartel members, from the opening scene of the pilot episode, get out of the vehicles, and my man Jimenez approaches, explaining to Tommy that he's been looking for him. Tommy explains that all he had to do was call the number on the lease agreement, and then he calls him Jimmy. Now, Jimenez explains to Tommy that he doesn't know him well enough to call him by his first name, that he should call him Sir if anything. He goes on to explain to Tommy that they have a problem, that he owes him a lot of money, and Tommy asks how. And Jimmy tells him that all his product burned up on the side of the road after the truck accident. Tommy explains to Jimmy that it's his company's road, that it's part of the lease, and that they have deeded access to it. He goes on to explain that it's not his road until the lease expires. He then explains that nowhere in the lease does it say that they can land a plane on it, and that it also doesn't say that they can use their plane to bring his stuff into the country. Tommy goes on to explain to Jimmy that because of him, he has lawyers up his ass so far they can see out of his mouth, not to mention the sheriff, the FAA, and the NTSB. He goes on to explain to Jimmy that his action put a giant bullseye on the patch. Jimmy again claims that Tommy owes him a lot of money, asking if he knows how much the shipment was worth that he lost. Tommy explains to Jimmy that he's the one with the problem, that the DEA has a satellite above the field they're standing in just waiting to see what kind of stupid shit he does next, and that his attempt to shake him down has no impact on the multinational corporations that own and run the oil industry. Jimmy explains to Tommy that this is why they don't want him here, and that he has a boss too, that he has lost millions on his road, and that he wants it back. Now, Jimmy explains to Tommy that maybe some of his oil wells will stop working, that maybe some of them will start blowing up, that he bets the oil companies will care then. Tommy agrees, telling him that they'll send the 1st Cavalry Division of the U.S. Army out there and start playing war games inside of a month. He explains to Jimmy that he doesn't know who he's effing with, so he should just take his licks like a man and stop stealing planes and landing them on active roadways. He then suggests that maybe Jimmy should buy his own plane and build his own runway. Now, Jimmy explains that then the plane could be traced back to him and that people would know where it lands. He tells Tommy to stick to drilling wells, that he doesn't know anything about his business, but that he's about to learn, and then the men walk back to their trucks and drive away. Now, at that point, Dale asks if the DEA indeed has a satellite over the field they're standing in, and Tommy explains that he just made all that up. Boss explains to Tommy that the cartel is a problem and that he doesn't want his guys getting shot up in the desert. Tommy explains that he'll figure something out, and Boss explains that he'd better because none of his guys are going to come back to the field until he does. Tommy then explains, I asked Dale if he recorded the incident, and Dale claims he did, showing Tommy his phone. Tommy then calls Monty, who answers just as he exits the chopper, and he explains that they have a problem they need to discuss in person. Tommy explains that he's headed back to Fort Worth, where he lives, as he boards the PJ. And Tommy tells him that he'll come see him tomorrow. Monty explains that afternoon is better and that he should come to the house. And Tommy tells him that he'll call when he's close. Monty gets on the plane and instructs the pilot to take off, and then sits down in his seat, checking his pulse, seemingly pretty stressed out. Now from there, we go back to Ariana's house, and Cooper has just finished mowing the front yard. He goes back inside and washes his hand in the kitchen sink as the dog is on the couch looking on. Now Ariana appears and apologizes for kissing him in front of Manuel, claiming that he doesn't help her, and then has the nerve to question who does and why, that she won't have it. She then tells Cooper that LVO didn't even like Manuel, which seems to make Cooper laugh. He then explains that the only reason he's there is because she was brave enough to ask for help, and that he's happy to give it if it's any help at all. Ariana tells him that he is helping and that she needs it. She then claims it's going to be harder than she thought to keep her heart young before offering to make Cooper dinner. Cooper explains that he's having dinner with his family, but that the dinner is a have to, not a want to. Ariana claims that she used to know what he means, but then her family all died. She then looks at Cooper solemnly and says, "Don't ever miss a family dinner, Cooper, because one of them will be the last. Could even be this one. Thank you for coming." Now keep that in mind. This is the writers kind of doing some telegraphing here, but just keep that in mind. Stick a pin in that. So from there, Cooper tells Ariana that he'll find out about the 401k, and he walks towards the door. Ariana stops him and remarks, "You know what's different about you?" Cooper turns as Ariana continues, "My friends gave me all this advice. Get a job, sell the house, move home, find a man. Like I don't know the options. No advice from you." And that's just not true. Cooper gave her a ton of advice, but we'll get back to that. Cooper replies, "If I could think of something to say that would help, I would say it." Again, this is messy writing. Ariana replies, "Nobody has anything to say that helps, but they keep talking. You listen." Now, I guess I agree there, right? Cooper smiles in response, and he puts on his boots and he exits the house. Now, from there, we go back to the oil house, and we see Tommy and Dale arriving from their encounter on the patch. They enter the house to find it completely redecorated, and Nathan and Ainsley sitting at the table. Dale heads upstairs as Tommy looks around. He calls out to Angela, and she enters, putting food on the table. Angela reminds Tommy that they agreed to family dinner at 7, and Tommy reminds her that she said 7 and that he said he had to work. He asks, "What's all this shit?" And Angela explains that she just steered into the West Texas of it all, that there's no point in decorating the house like it's a condo in Dallas. Tommy asks what happened to all the old furniture. Angela explains that she gave it to the movers. Tommy explains that they don't own that furniture, that it's rented. And Angela replies, "Well, this is our furniture now." Your furniture now, excuse me. Nathan interjects, explaining that from a legal standpoint, the furniture belongs to Victor. My man Nathan always on the ball, ain't he? Tommy asks, "Charged it to your husband's credit card, did you?" Like he didn't know that. Again, this is messy dialogue, right? Because she explained to Tommy at the very beginning of the episode that she was going to use Victor's credit card to buy furniture, and Tommy was like, "Okay, go nuts." So I don't understand why he's acting like it's a problem now. But this is on the writers, not the characters. Angela insists that Victor hasn't checked the credit card statement in decades. Tommy explains that he doesn't have to, that that's what his accountant's for. Angela explains that Victor's accountant doesn't check the credit card statements either. He's a shitty accountant then. At that point, there's a knock at the door, and Angela gets excited and she answers it to find Cooper standing there. The pair hug, and Angela remarks that Cooper is both skinny and filthy, and she asks if he's been playing football. Cooper explains that he was helping a friend mow the lawn, and Angela asks him to wash his hands and take off his boots before turning to Tommy and asking if they have time for Cooper to shower. Cooper explains to his mom that he's not going to shower before his mom asks him to just go in the dining room and sit next to Ainsley. He does, and he sits down, telling Ainsley she smells like the beach. She tells him he smells like a goat. Dale comes in to tell the family that he'll see them after a while, but Angela insists that he join them for dinner, so he does. Angela then brings out the main course and sits opposite Tommy at the table, who is, and she explains that it's been 10 years since they've all been together. That's a long time. Ainsley smiles at her, and Angela reiterates how happy she is before asking if they should bless the food. Tommy replies, "Why not? I can use anything I can get today." Angela asks everyone to grab hands. Ainsley refuses to take Cooper's hand, and he explains that he could care less. Angela remarks that God cares before insisting that Ainsley take her brother's hand, and she finally does. Angela blesses the food and thanks God for allowing her family to all be together, and for Dale and Nathan, who she calls Ned, and he has to, correct her, and she kind of goes on this little tirade. Then she goes on to talk about how they should celebrate God by living their best lives before ending the long-winded prayer. Now, as they all begin to make their plates and eat, Angela informs them that the food is Italian and that the wine is French. Tommy tells Dale that he's going to have a beer and offers to get him one. Angela asks why he can't drink wine. Tommy explains that he's an alcoholic. And Angela asks when they stop fermenting beer. Tommy explains that it's low alcohol beer, and if they start making low alcohol wine, that he'll drink the shit out of it. So as everyone eats, Angela asks Cooper if he's all better from his explosion. Cooper explains that he's fine. She then explains to Cooper that Ainsley's going to Tech just like he did, so no Alabama. Cooper replies, "I'm sure all the sororities are beside themselves with joy." Angela tells Cooper to be nice, and Ainsley interjects, "Or maybe just don't speak for the rest of your life." Tommy then asks what it is they're eating, and Angela explains that it's bolognese. Tommy replies, "So spaghetti." Angela remarks that it isn't spaghetti, that spaghetti doesn't use veal or pork, and that it doesn't use cream or sugar. And at that point, Ainsley stops eating and asks, "Is there sugar in this?" and Angela explains that there's not enough sugar in the dish to make a difference. Now, Angela then asks Nathan how his day was. He explains that he's an attorney and that his day is governed by attorney-client privilege, so he can't talk about it. She then asks Dale about his day, and he rates it about a 5 before Tommy remarks that till the end of the day, it was just about a 2. Angela asks what happened, and no one answers. Angela asks Tommy if he's a lawyer now, too. So Tommy explains that he stood in 100-degree heat all day staring at gauges and oil pumps until some cartel members showed up and demanded that they pay them back for the drugs they lost on their lease to the tune of about $30 million. He then asks, guess how they took it when I said no? Nathan asks if that really happened, and Tommy explains that it did. Dale also corroborates the account. Nathan asks if Monty knows, and Tommy explains that he's going to see him tomorrow. Tommy then continues telling Angela that his hemorrhoid finally burst, which grosses Ainsley out. And that's the point where Angela, kind of becomes flustered and excuses herself from the table. Now, at that point, Ainsley tells Tommy to go after her and apologize, and Tommy, obliges her. Nathan asks Dale if he thinks they will have to eat dinner together every night, and Dale explains that he doesn't know, but that the spaghetti is pretty good. Now, Tommy enters the kitchen to find Angela throwing the rest of the food in the trash, claiming that it didn't take him long to ruin dinner. She goes on to explain that she spent all day shopping and decorating and cooking for him. Tommy explains to Angela that those are her favorite things to do, and so he's glad she got to do them. He then explains that they're not going to have a mouse fart's chance in hell of making it, that she's going to have to remember why they're there, that they're in Midland to work, and that it's not home to any of them. And Angela replies, how long have you been here, Tommy? Let me answer for you. 33 years. You may not like your home, but this is it. And I need it to feel like a home if we're going to be in it. 33 years, man. That is bananas. So Tommy replies, well, if you want to put $100,000 on your husband's credit card to spruce up the place, then do it for you. Don't do it for us. And don't expect us to appreciate it or even care. Now, Angela remarks that it's a little over $200,000, which is crazy, but, I digress. It really is Angela, though. It's totally an Angela thing to do. I mean, if you want to cook, be my guest, but don't expect us to be here when it's ready, and don't expect us to appreciate it. I mean, we do, but don't expect it. See, that's the problem. You've got this image in your brain of how everything's supposed to go, but we don't know what that is, We don't see it. So when it doesn't go the way you dreamed it up, you get pissed off, throw a tantrum, and then I get pissed off, throw a bigger tantrum, and then we're back to square one. Angela thinks, and she takes a deep breath before remarking to Tommy that their children hate each other. Tommy explains that they're teenagers, that they're supposed to hate each other. Angela explains that Cooper is not a teenager, that he's a man. She asks Tommy when the F that happened. She goes on to ask Tommy if she looks like a woman with a 22-year-old son. She claims that she's turning into a GMILF. Tommy asks what that is, and Angela explains that it's a grandmother I'd like to fuck. And that she's aging out of cougar status. I felt like that was a totally unnecessary line, but, whatever. Tommy then explains to Angela that he's going to ask her a question, and that when he does, she doesn't want her to hit him. Before asking at what point she is in her menstrual cycle, Angela replies, oh, you mother effer, don't you dare. Tommy replies, let me guess. I'm going to say it's right towards the end. Angela warns Tommy to be careful. Tommy asks if he's wrong, and Angela replies, I'm stone-ass serious right now. Tommy replies, tell me the effing truth, am I wrong? Angela laughs before remarking that her period is coming any minute. Tommy replies, that's what I thought. Angela claims that she needs a Midol and an effing margarita. Tommy replies, well, here's the good news. We got all of that. The pair share a hug, and Tommy tells Angela to cry it all out and that he'll go finish his spaghetti before it gets cold. Angela kisses him on the cheek and replies, call it spaghetti again and see what happens. And as they continue to hug, Tommy says spaghetti again, and Angela hits him in his nether regions, asking, you like that? And Tommy replies, no. Why in the hell do you think I would like that? As Angela laughs. Now, back at the table, Nathan explains that their current situation is an unsustainable way for them to cohabitate. Dale agrees that the situation has a shelf life. Ainsley smiles as she hears her parents laughing in the other room. Cooper notices and asks why she's smiling. Ainsley asks Cooper why he isn't smiling, and Cooper explains that he's old enough to remember the last time they were together. Now, from there, we see Cooper driving home. He gets a call from Ariana, frantic, claiming that she's afraid to be alone in her house. Boy, Ariana got it bad, boy. She tells Cooper that she doesn't know how to be by herself. She claims she's too scared to even miss Elvio. Cooper explains to Ariana that she has that big dog and that there's no boogeyman in the world that wants to mess with him. Ariana explains that Elvio bought the dog to watch over them while he was working. Cooper explains to Ariana that she has plenty to worry about, but that someone coming into her house isn't one of those things. Ariana chuckles before admitting that Cooper's probably right. She apologized to Cooper for calling so late. Cooper tells her to call anytime, and then Ariana says goodnight and hangs up. Boy, Cooper like him some Ariana. Boy, he bringing a lot of drama into his life just to be around this chick. Anyway, Cooper arrives at the man camp and parks his truck. He gets out and heads to the trailer. He climbs the steps and opens his door, but finds Manuel and Antonio inside with a few other men. And Manuel remarks, "Out late, huh?" And the men begin beating on Cooper inside the tight space, even breaking a window in the act. Now, the next morning, we see a young boy and his father driving a station wagon down the road past the oil house as the boy throws newspapers out the window. And inside the oil house, in Tommy's bedroom, Angela awakes to find herself alone in bed. She gets up and wraps herself in the bedsheet, and she goes into the bathroom to find Tommy sitting on the toilet. So they were married for a while, so okay. Tommy explains to Angela that he didn't mean to wake her. Angela asks if it's an early one, and Tommy explains that he has to go to Fort Worth. Angela asks when he'll be back, and Tommy replies, "When your period's over." Angela warns Tommy again to watch it. He then explains that he'll be back later that night or the next day, before asking Angela if she wants him to bring something back from up there for her. Angela explains that she needs to go and sit down with Victor. Tommy explains that Victor's probably got it all figured out by now. For real, it's been like 3 episodes now. I think he understands you ain't coming back. Angela explains that Victor was good to her and that he was good to their kids, that he deserves a face-to-face. Tommy replies, "Well, I know how you look at it that way, but from a man's perspective, I'd rather you just call me. That way you're not sitting around the living room all awkward and stuff doing some weird handshake or half hug. Now, if you need to do it for you, then I get it. That's another thing." Angela replies, "Well, I do, because this feels like cheating." And Tommy replies, "Well, hell, it is cheating, honey. It's been cheating." Angela groans as Tommy explains that to her that going to Fort Worth isn't going to change anything, especially for Victor. Angela then explains that Victor has her car, and Tommy laughs before replying, "Okay, now we're getting somewhere." Angela asks Tommy if she can ride with him, and Tommy replies, "You can do anything you want to." Tommy grabs his keys as Angela steps closer and remarks, "Last chance to back out if you don't want this, if you don't think we can make this work." Tommy replies, "I don't think we have an Ice Cube's chance in hell to make this work, but I don't possess the power to say no to you, especially when you look at me like that." And Tommy's been saying this isn't going to work for a while, but he's steadily, and I get it, she's probably the baddest chick he could have ever hoped to get. But every episode he says it's not going to work at least 3 times. Anyway, the pair stare at each other and then share a kiss before Angela walks away, telling Tommy that he's so close to being trained. Tommy asks, "Is that right?" Angela plops herself back down in the bed, and Tommy tells her to get dressed and that he'll meet her downstairs. Now, next we see the crews leaving the man camp early in the morning, as they do. Boss sits in the truck with Manuel and Antonio waiting for Cooper. And Boss asks if they know if either of them knows where he is, and no one answers. And then Manuel finally suggests that they leave him, and Boss eventually does. And we see the door to Cooper's trailer cracked and his body laying lifeless on the floor of his room. Now, from there, we see Tommy and Angela in Tommy's truck on the way to Fort Worth on the highway. And Angela seems excited for their road trip. Tommy is more subdued. Angela remarks that he's grumpy without his coffee and hands him the cup. He declines, telling Angela that he'll get to it later. Angela suggests that they play a game where, every time you see an out-of-state license plate, you get a point, and when you see a car with only one headlight working, you get 5 points. Tommy asks how they would know someone only had one headlight if it's daytime, and Angela asks, "Whatever happened to your inability to say no to me, you mother effing stick in the mud?" Tommy replies, "I can't do this for 4 hours." At that point, his phone starts to vibrate. He answers, and it's his Rick, one of the MTEX oil workers. He explains to Tommy that there's an issue with how the parts were delivered to work over the new rig. Tommy explains that he's only 10 minutes away and that he'll be right there. He then tells Angela they're going to have to take a little detour. And Angela seems excited to see Tommy in action. She asks if he's going to yell at anybody, and Tommy explains that he probably will. Angela then asks if he wants a hand job as Tommy speeds towards the site. Now, upon arrival, Tommy parks and exits the vehicle to find Rick standing on top of a group of pipes tied onto the back of a truck. Angela gets out of the truck as Tommy does as well. He puts his hard hat on and instructs Angela to get back in the truck, explaining that there's cranes and excavators and front end loaders moving stuff around everywhere, and that she has to have a hard hat on and steel-toed boots to be out there. Now, she asks Tommy if his boots are steel-toed, and Tommy replies, "Don't you look at me that way," before walking towards the rig. Angela gets back in the truck before telling Tommy that he needs to bring the hard hat home with him, And Tommy just laughs and then continues to the truck where Rick is standing. Now Rick exclaims, "You see this shit? It's going to take me 2 effing days to sort this out." Tommy replies, "Yeah, well, that's faster than they can." Rick replies, "I shouldn't have to do it at all. It's a waste of my effing time." And at that moment, the straps holding the pipes together on the back of the truck give way, and Rick falls as the pipes roll out the truck on top of him. The other workers rush to his aid, but Tommy stops them, explaining that if they move the pipes, that Rick will simply bleed out. He bends down and softly calls out to Rick, telling him to hang in there. Rick asks to call his wife. Tommy gives him his phone before telling Rick that he's going to go call for help. As Tommy walks away, Rick asks what he should tell his wife, and Tommy tells him to just tell her that he loves her. Tommy then turns and runs back to his truck and takes Angela's phone as she asks what's going on. Tommy tells Angela to stay in the truck before running back to the site of the accident as he calls 911. And by the time he gets back to Rick, Rick is dead. At that point, he gets off the phone and he turns to find Angela standing there, horrified at the sight. Cut to black. So, the first thing about this episode that comes to mind is the confrontation we all knew was coming between Cooper and Manuel over the Ariana of it all. You might remember that when Cooper first got hooked up with Manuel and Boss's crew, that Manuel had threatened him with a knife and said, "Hey, stay away from my cousin's widow." And so we kind of knew that when Ariana called Cooper that this was going to come to a head. Now, it came to a head a little faster than I thought it would be, right? This is something that was necessary for both Cooper's character arc and the show's season arc as well, as it is used here to fill the gap between the first few episodes of the season and the last few episodes of the season. So like I told you guys, I thought it was well placed here in the episode because we need something to kind of drive the narrative as we kind of wait for the finale of the season, so to speak, which would be like, in my opinion, episodes like 8, 9, 10. You know what I mean? Now, what I didn't like about this whole thing was how contradictory and contrived it felt. In fact, there were lots of contradictions in this part of the episode with Ariana's character especially. First off, I thought things would have worked better if Cooper had run into Ariana somewhere in town by chance rather than having her call him out of the blue like she did, but I digress, right? We got what we got. Secondly, it turns out that Ariana called Cooper to help her organize her bills and build a budget, but then later, before Cooper leaves for his family dinner, she explains that everybody gave her advice like she didn't know what her options were, but that Cooper didn't have any advice for her, that he just listened. And this is just fundamentally untrue, because in the very same episode, Cooper had just got done telling her that, she had enough money in her bank account to pay the bills for 6 months, that, she was entitled to LVO's 401k, that she should sell her truck to lower her expenses, and that all sounds like advice to me. Now, as for the grass cutting, it made no sense that she only wanted her backyard cut. Because who only cuts their backyard, right? If you're going to let somebody mow your yard at all, it would seem like the front yard would be the one that you would cut because that's the yard that the neighbors see. Especially in this case because that's, the part of the yard that narratively we need Cooper to cut so that the writers could shoehorn Manuel and the confrontation between Manuel and Cooper into this episode. I thought that it was maybe too early for this, and that combined with how Manuel just seemed to show up at Ariana's house while Cooper was there, especially since Ariana claims a few moments later that Manuel doesn't come around, was just a little sus to me. Now, Manuel threatens Cooper with a gun this time instead of a knife. I think Antonio had the knife the gun before. I think Manuel had it and then he dropped it and Antonio picked it up. I think that's what happened. And he did tell Cooper to stay away from Ariana. So this is just Manuel following through on his threat, which I'm fine with. But it doesn't make much sense from a character perspective, if you will, that you're going to threaten the life of the very person whose job is going to be to keep you safe while you work on oil rigs, right? Cooper making a mistake could get you killed. So why would you make his life more stressful when you got to work with him every day and depend on him to, in a sense, protect your life? It makes Manuel an effing idiot in more ways than one, if you ask me. Now, the lines about Manuel not caring about whether she lost her baby, lost her house or her baby starved, and only caring about whether she fucked another man was gold. Gold star in that regard. And her kissing Cooper was kind of stupid on her part because I believe that makes her partly responsible for what happens to Cooper later in the episode, in my opinion. But again, we'll stick a pin in that for now. And what I will tell you guys is that Cooper's absolutely positively not dead. Not even in the slightest. But we'll cross that bridge in a second. Now, Monty's diatribe at the conference he was at was the part of the episode where the writers make us eat our vegetables, and I was here for it. But you guys know me; I live for the data dump, right? It's the part of the episode that lets you know the writers had to do some research while they were working on the scripts. But we also see that Monty may have to pivot a bit in his business strategy because Bob Knowles tells him in no uncertain terms that, quote unquote, the party is coming to an end, and that his kids might have oil money, but his grandkids won't. And that seems to make Monty think or stress. Like he may have to make a decision about what might come after MTech's oil. And though I don't see Monty shutting it down this season, that might be a point of interest as it pertains to how the show as a whole could end. So just, file that away somewhere and remember I said that if you want. Now, Rebecca meets Nathan at the oil house, and that's an absolute shit show. I thought Ainsley is kind of starting to become a nuisance in this episode, but I think it's just a product of her being alone and out of her element. She basically interrupted a business meeting and asked Rebecca to put a bikini on and come tan in the backyard with her, right? And even though, Tommy made the point that Rebecca's young enough to be hanging out with his daughter, she's really not. Rebecca's somewhere around 30 and Ainsley is 17, so they are not, they're not like cohorts. That's not what's going on here. Now, Rebecca mentions to Nathan that the oil house has a lawsuit waiting to happen, which Nathan has mentioned several times at this point. So one has to wonder if something's going to happen at the house that will cause some sort of legal problem for Tommy, or for someone working at MTech, like walking into the shower while Ainsley's in it. Something we've already seen happen. And, when you start talking about sexual harassment, it feels like there's going to be something that has to do with sexual harassment that's going to become a real problem at some point. And I tend to think it'll probably be with Ainsley, not with Angela. But, we'll see what the writers decide to do there. Now, as Angela redecorates the oil house with Victor's credit card, which was so Angela again, Ainsley's in the backyard tanning and she meets Shelby, the girl next door, which I think is the writers trying to have Ainsley put some roots down in Midland and maybe give her something to do other than tan, because she absolutely needs to do that. That's literally all she's done since the pilot episode, and that shit is starting to get old at this point. And we're 5 episodes in at this point, and it hasn't even been a week yet in real time in the story so far. Now, how do I know that? Because Ainsley started her spring break in the pilot episode. Spring break is 1 week long, typically speaking, and Ainsley is still there and hasn't gone to school yet, even though, it's looking like she may be moving to Midland for good and then, thus transferring schools and that kind of thing, but spring break's not over yet. So we're still within a week of when this show started, 5 episodes in, which is kind of interesting that all this stuff has happened within less than a week's time. She needs to find a new boyfriend. She needs to go to school, find a new boyfriend, something. So having her get invited to the patch party by Shelby at least puts her on a trajectory that could prove more interesting than what we've been seeing of her ever since Dakota left. Now, one narrative surprise for me was Jimenez and the boys showing up on the patch and threatening Tommy over their drugs. And I won't lie to you guys, I had forgotten all about them because we haven't seen them since the beginning of the pilot episode. Sure, they stole the plane and the drugs and all that. I mean, that was them. But I wasn't sure we were going to actually see them again during the episode. I thought it was just going to be about the lawsuit of the plane being stolen and the truck accident and stuff like that. I had completely forgotten about the actual cartel. You know what I mean? And I won't lie, I thought this was a good time to have them come back because, again, I told you guys we're in the doldrums of this season, which can sometimes get boring and characters can kind of get off task, if you will. But the writers have done a decent job of controlling the flow of drama this season, though I don't always like how they incorporate said dramatic elements. But it looks like the cartel is about to turn up on Tommy and MTech, so I'm really interested to see how that turns out. It feels like somebody else is probably going to die before the season is out because a lot of people have been getting killed this season. Now, family dinner was also a shit show, right? But I think we all knew it would be. We learned that Angela can cook. We see just how much Cooper and Ainsley dislike one another. And we get to see again just how bad Tommy and Angela are for each other, even though I do believe they truly love each other. I think they're just both incredibly flawed people. And maybe, the only people that can have even a shot at making the other one happy is the other person. So maybe they're destined to be together, even though it's going to be an extremely bumpy ride. And I think especially until Tommy decides to retire from what it is he does right now. Ainsley seems to want her parents back together, probably because she's too young to remember when they were last together. Remember, they've been divorced about 10 years, so that would have made Ainsley about 7 when they split. But Cooper's 22, so he was nearly a teenager when that happened. We also learned that Ainsley is going to go to Texas Tech like Cooper did instead of, following Dakota to Alabama. So, there's that. And that's more of a long-term story situation than a short-term story situation, but, fine. And after everything that happened in this episode, including Rebecca fearing sexual harassment lawsuits and Nathan making the point that their situation at the oil house is unsustainable, along with Angela reminding Tommy that he's been in Midland for 33 years despite the fact that he doesn't view Midland as his home, I wonder if by season's end, Tommy's going to have to move his family out of that oil house and look for a more permanent situation. So keep an eye out for that as a good resting place for that particular plot point, maybe even as early as the end of this season. Now, as for Cooper getting beaten up by Manuel and Antonio and friends, I don't know what to think there, because while I think it's the natural progression of the rising escalation between Cooper and Manuel specifically, I think it's absolutely unacceptable that Cooper is now going to go back to the hospital for a second time this season, because he's absolutely not dead. There's no way in the world they've been building Cooper up as a character to this point in the season, and then they're going to kill him off midway through it. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This show is about Tommy and his family. They're going to keep Tommy and his family together. I wouldn't be surprised if every single person in Tommy's immediate family survives the entire series. Maybe except Tommy. That would be like a gut punch towards the end. But, that's a long ways off, so let's not go there. Now, some of the character arcs in this story just go round and round in circles. And again, it just makes me wonder if this season wouldn't have been better off being shorter. Because, by an episode or two. Keep in mind that Linus, another Taylor Sheridan show on the Paramount Network, had an 8-episode season 2. So I feel like that could have worked here as well. Because if you had to keep sending Cooper to the hospital, if you had to keep having Ainsley tan in the backyard, and you keep having Tommy and Angela fight over the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over, that's retreaded, rescorched earth. And so we're basically just kind of watching this. It feels like we're watching the episodes on a loop at times, because you're going, didn't they talk about this very same thing last episode? And we just keep going and keep going and keep going in circles. So I feel like that's something that's hurting the show, and that the season could have been 2 episodes shorter. And that brings us to Rick's accident at the new well, which makes that now the 3rd major drilling accident and the 4th person killed in 5 episodes. And I know these TV shows can be melodramatic at times. In fact, Taylor Sheridan shows tend to thrive on melodrama. But, Yellowstone, is a prime example. But again, we've seen this already. And at this point, I'm looking for Taylor to write me something new. Now, overall, I give this episode a 65%, or 6.5 if you're thinking IMDb score. Look, a lot of TV shows start out strong and then they peter out as the first season goes on and heads towards the season finale. And this show is no different. Now, I do think what helps this show is that it started at a much higher point with a strong pilot, so the fall off still puts the show in a halfway decent place, the narrative mishaps notwithstanding. But Taylor has got to get his shit together here, because he doesn't have his usual excuse here, in that he likes to start shows off strong by writing and directing all the early episodes of his new shows, and then he kind of fucks off and hands that job off to other people. And sometimes you end up doing their very damnedest to ruin the show, a la Mayor of Kingstown. You know what I'm saying? Mayor of Kingstown started off extremely strong. Now it's in season 3, and there was a lot to hate about season 3. But that's because Taylor Sheridan is not directing much anymore of that show. He's not even writing very much of those scripts anymore. So you can tell the difference in the quality of writing. But Taylor, from what I understand, has written every episode of this season. So when I notice contradictory dialogue from characters, especially in the exact same scenes or same episodes, that's kind of something that's kind of caught my attention. And the plot point faux pas, I have to wonder if Taylor might be losing his fastball a bit because he's spreading himself so thin. Like maybe he's peaked and he's now kind of starting to come back to the pack. Or maybe he should just focus on less shows. I'm not here to, pocket watch nobody. I'm not going to tell him to turn down no money from Paramount. But, this show is starting to really suffer as we get towards as we've now hit the midpoint. Look, nevertheless, I'm all in still, at least until we find out how the season ends. And at this point, we're halfway there. And if I had to give the show a midterm grade at this point, it would be a B minus or so. It's headed towards C territory, though, that's for sure. I feel like the writer's going to have to break the supporting characters out of the circular patterns and force them into new narrative territory in order for this show to kind of recover. And the show can recover. It absolutely can. I also think some of these episodes are just longer than they need to be. Like, I mean, there's no reason why you should have an episode longer than an hour. 45 minutes is real good. Ainsley's shtick is getting a little old. Cooper's arc seems to be on repeat at this point. It's like, go to the oil field, end up in the hospital. Go to the oil field, end up in the hospital, right? Oh, and then every once in a while, flirt with Ariana, right? And Angela sits around with dick all to do, right? She's got nothing to do but just fuss about, trying to, feeling bad about cheating on Victor and trying to make her family work, after all this time. And even Rebecca is starting to sound like a bitchy broken record at this point. So, that being said, I am looking forward to seeing what happens between Cooper and Ariana. How far is that relationship going to progress between now and the end of the season? Are they going to be full-on boyfriend, girlfriend by the end of this thing? Which I think that's absolutely where we're headed. And especially since she had a hand in getting his ass beat. So I'm waiting for Angela and Tommy to finally decide once and for all what they're going to actually do. Are they going to give it a go or not? Because they keep having the same conversation over and over and over again. This is 3 episodes in a row now where they've had the same exact conversation. The drama with the cartel is a nice additional card in the deck, one again that I forgot was even there to be played, but I like it, and quite frankly, the show needs it right now to break up the monotony. Look, guys, TV shows are more about plot progression than they are about the small writing, right? But what has always made Taylor Sheridan's show so good is the fact that he takes great care of the characters' dialogue. But I can't lie, in this show, he's been slipping on his pimping a bit, and I hope he gets it together in time to land this plane at season's end. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to watch the 5th episode of Landman yet? If you have, how do you think it's measured up to the episode that came before it? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also support the channel by leaving a super thanks now. If you should be so inclined, I'd really appreciate it. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all in the next video.